So there we have it on Thursday, May the 29th, last Thursday of the month, which means our last session for this month. And we're lucky to have the incomparable Lucas Rizzotto, who has been described by himself and the media as a one-man invention machine, among other things. But I kind of look at him as a Renaissance man, 21st century Renaissance man, artisan, and also a polymath because you do have rather weighty thing on your shoulders there, and what you've invented in the XR space is just one facet of what you're building these days, and maybe you can give just a little bit of background for those who don't know where you came from, who you are, and you're also a New Yorker like us, right?
Yeah, I moved to New York this summer again. I used to live here in the past, and I tried a couple places in the United States, and I think New York is what I gravitate towards the most. Uh, San Francisco is definitely not for me. It's for a very specific crowd. But I've been interested in emerging technologies for a long time. So brain computers, AI, like VR, AR. That's the kind of space I've been operating in, and just trying to find out like what makes these spaces interesting. What are projects we can do that like explore and deepen our relationship with technology, and just having a lot of fun with it over the last decade. But now, oh God, almost decade, and uh, and yeah, that's what I've been doing. But
Well,
now I'm specifically
but
focused on
talk about
stories.
your
Yeah.
first sort of interactive story that you built, because you've worked in all modes of XR, and in the broader sort of digital ecosystem. So where did that really begin for you?
It began when I started learning how to code in 20 at the end of 2016, early 2017. I started with the HoloLens, which is probably the for those who know, like one of it's a hard platform to start with because there's no tutorials. It's all like documentation. But I started there and I started building a couple of games and a couple of apps. And then somewhere in 2017, I discovered the little nugget that of wisdom, I guess, that perspective is more important than technical skill. That using technology and approaching it from a unique angle is often like way more interesting than doing something that's just purely technically advanced. And then I started doubling down and I created a very weird narrative experimental piece called Breath Let's Go in 2018 for VR headsets. And then the experiments just kept on coming. But I guess that's how it started. Before I was trying to do like startup-y things, but then me understanding and learning that approaching technology from your own unique perspective is, I think, for the world more valuable than doing something that if you don't do it, someone's going to do it 6 months from now.
Right, and that's also the aspect of really looking at different forms of storytelling. For example, for those who don't know, you built the app Pillow, right? I mean, this was how would you describe that? The first, what was the first app for lying down in bed? Um, I mean,
Yeah,
which I think is a great description, by the way. Yeah.
I was compelled. I think the idea like started in 2021 of just like, okay, what are some other ways we can interact, especially with mixed reality, that we're not, looking at. And if you look at all the marketing videos of everything in mixed reality since forever, they're always in the living room. And so I started to look at other spaces that we spend like a majority of our time, like the bathroom and the bedroom. And both of those are two verticals that were completely ignored by the immersive space. So, and the more I looked at lying down, the more I saw a lot of like good opportunities to design like beautiful interactions, but also lying down seemed to solve a lot of interesting design problems. Like one of the hardest things about doing augmented and mixed reality applications for people's homes is that like the shape of their home can change significantly from one
Right.
place to another. But beds are sort of like standardized play spaces that you can spend a lot of time in. We also learned that like lying down, there's like less motion sickness, and then it was something that was started out as a playful idea, but then the more I looked into it, the more I was like, oh, this is actually like compelling from a user standpoint, especially like the things that we built for it. But it also solves a bunch of design problems. So I like to as a whole, I guess, in my career, I like to, I guess similar to Apple in some way, I wait until everybody has made an assumption, and then I go in the opposite direction. Because the moment everyone agrees on what the future is with something that's so undefined, and this applies to AI too, it usually means that everyone's wrong. Because and we keep learning that like time and time again, right? The future is like very complicated. There's a lot of things going on, and if we find consensus early, it usually means we're missing something. So, yeah.
Well, and you know, again, I think that what's interesting to me is that you have really looked at, and you've been early enough in certain things to know to accept some boundaries and break some boundaries. I mean, and you were also part of AR House as well, right? And I want you to talk a little bit about that because I think that was a very interesting experiment.
Yeah, especially coming out of COVID, I felt like the augmented reality space was a little bit earlier than everyone expected in terms of like maturity. So, what do you do when you're like years early into an industry? What felt natural to me is that like you start community. So, I kind of like ran this arts residency for about I think 18 months, 24 months, and it was a wonderful, crazy experience. And yeah, I got to make a lot of friends, but also got to make a hopefully like we created a very tight knit community. It was a very beautiful thing that came in and out of existence, like the best things in youth, I guess.
Right. But I mean, what did you learn from that? I mean, in terms of being a producer and working with a community, what were some of the things that you take away from that?
Oh my God. I think the main thing is like just from a community standpoint, when you have a bunch of like really talented people, the less direction, like you need to give them freedom to do whatever it is they want, and they'll always surprise you. But also really finding a mix because we had monthly cohorts where we have like different groups of people living together, of having like a couple of them lean more technical, a couple of them lean a little bit more design and you know, like visual like artists, and having one or two wild cards like here's a rapper, here's an opera singer, was very interesting. And just watching these things happen organically was what was really beautiful. But I can't emphasize how important the wild cards were of mixing people with experience with people that have absolutely no experience, and come from a completely different field. Like get an augmented reality designer, a developer, and a magician to collaborate, and they're going to do something very new and very cool. So I guess this is one of the main things I learned. Cross pollination is everything. And actually, I've always wanted the house not to be just about augmented reality. This was like a concession I made with my co-founder at the time. But I think cross pollination is everything, and it's yeah, when you have a bunch of people who just like have kind of like the same skill set, it's like pleasant, but you don't learn much. But if you mix them up, a lot of beautiful stuff happens.
Yeah, and I look, I find that that's an undervalued statement in the broader technology world, but also in the arts, and yet we found certainly in recent years we recently had Brandon Powers, who was part of the Lincoln Center amazing incubator. But this is there's still not enough of it from my perspective. I mean, I was fortunate to put together a collaboration between Bell Labs scientists and BAM, that's Brooklyn Academy of Music artists, which ran for 2 years. Took 2 years to get off the ground, but that was in the late '90s, and that was, again, we have a long history in that world, going back to Billy Kluver and experiments in arts and technology, and Jasper Johns, all those great people in the '50s and '60s and '70s, and there's a lot that's been written, but I feel like there's not enough. They were pushing boundaries and inventing things themselves. And I think that that's where really are a descendant of that, in my view, because you don't put any limitations and any boundaries. And by the way, I have a question. Was that opera singer by any chance Lauren Michelle? It
Yep.
was. Okay. Well, she's on a panel I'm doing it 2 weeks from today in Long Beach at AWE, which is a brazen pitch for my panel, which is creating lifelike immersive experiences with volumetric video production. Yes, that's right. And Lauren's on that panel, and that's why we're not going to be on 2 weeks from now. But I'll get back to that in a minute. But it's interesting getting back to what you were saying about cross pollination. I mean, so fast forward to today. What's your take today on how people are kind of commingling in different areas of technology in the arts?
Like in general,
Yeah,
um, I've been so kind of like I've been drowning in my own stuff a lot now, and I've been enjoying just being part of other people's communities to the point that I haven't been like watching. I haven't been watching things this closely, but in New York, at least I'm part of like a couple of like different communities in which you have lots of people exploring technologies from different angles. AI is definitely enabling people to do slightly more ambitious projects in general, just because the time it takes to get some experimental things off the ground has like decreased substantially. So I think there's like a lot of interesting stuff happening. AI is definitely enabling people who are less technical to approach technology from their own unique perspectives. So there's a lot of that happening. Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm benefiting from it as well, I guess.
And so let's talk about what you're doing with Lucas Builds the Future, and talk a bit about that, because that is definitely part of your brand, your story, what you're presenting.
Yeah, I'm currently working on like in like a short form series about AI glasses I've been working with for like a long time, and I think we're about 15 episodes in, and looks like the final thing is going to be like 40 or 50 maybe. And it's just as somebody who's been really like always a big fan of like approaching new mediums and finding out how to tell stories with them, I've doing VR and AR was like very interesting, but I'm also like, okay, how can you you know uh, what are the undervalued, what are the underestimated methods of mainstream storytelling that I can really like dive into? And I think short form is like there's so much potential with short form, and most people dismiss it as like brain rot and just a place for like trash and ads and AI generated
That's
slop.
because they haven't done it. That's why.
Yeah, because the economics are not there, right? There's very little incentive for anyone to sit down and like, I want to do something that could be on Netflix, but make it a short form series. So I started doing that, and now it's getting, it got some good momentum. I think like the series overall so far has like 33 million views, which is nice. And maybe it will turn into a movie. I'm in talks to see if that will happen. But I've been doing that. I've been focusing, still building projects and telling stories about around them, but seeing like, okay, how good can you make like a short form series online? And I'm also doing some live shows stuff because I'm on the other end, I'm like offline as well. Like, how can you do an interactive performance with hundreds of people bringing their phones into the mix? So these are like the two areas I've been focusing on. Um, One is like online storytelling, the other one's like offline storytelling, and it's been very rewarding. And especially because I think it's like the more the internet gets overtaken by AI stuff, the more I think live performance is going to be it's going to matter. Actually, I think this is going to be a like big return to offline places, spaces.
You are so shall we say, of the millisecond, because before we started recording this, we were chatting about VO3 and some of the stuff that people are creating with that, which good, you can do that. Congratulations. But I think that um, I think the human can tell when there's something off, and I love that you're hitting live hard, because I think that I like to think that there's a new generation of creators who will follow you and mix live with live human performance with other aspects of capture and also playback, and bringing devices into this in sort of a mixed mode, which we've been seeing for a while now, of course. But I think that may be an interesting driver. So what have you learned from your AI glasses experiences, and which ones, if I might ask, do you find most promise with?
In terms of like use cases,
Yeah,
yeah, I started to like first thing realize that like headsets are not a form factor that I think the mainstream public is like really interested in. Like, I think I started shifting into like glasses about 2.5 years ago, and just like building stuff for like stuff that was very early back then. And I think the thing that became immediately obvious to me once I started to like build a lot of things for like smart glasses is that I think like the biggest mistake the XR industry has made is that it's not also a mistake because AI was not in the mix then, but um, augmenting the world is not interesting to people. It's interesting for a second. You see a dinosaur walking in your living room, like that's cool. But then after, you're like, why? But augmenting people is where really like that's the use case. It's not putting something on your table. It is making you smarter, making you better at your job, making you more charismatic. It's like it's a shift between the outside world into like going in and making you like augmenting you as a person. And AI really like enables that, and it has sort of like in my mind completely upended the XR market because we've been focused on changing spaces instead of changing people. And I think that shift to me made glasses make a lot of sense as a form factor, but it also taught me that 3D is not nearly as important as I thought it was. And I think it's like any of us have really like thought it's like, and this is coming from somebody who's had spent most of his like career doing 3D things. It was rough to navigate, but I think that was one of the key things I learned.
Well, and again, I mean, from the standpoint of how people would bring in these tools, it's really for me, it's just a way to accelerate the process. It's not saying, hey, you spent X number of hours or even months on a spot. It could be a 30-second commercial, could be a 2-minute short film, could be whatever. But again, we were joking about vibe coding earlier as well, which I think as a term is like self-parody, frankly. But look, we have people who are chipping themselves and doing all kinds of things. So shouldn't we assume that these AIs and whatever we want to do would just be like using any other tool you would use to choreograph a dance, speaking of Brandon Powers, or do your storyboarding, or just add different layers to your narrative, right?
So what's the question?
Well,
I was
well,
following inside, but
it's basically how you bring AI into what you're doing, whether it's in real life or it's something you're doing in 3D.
yeah, I mean, I personally, I guess, treat AI as like an intern. And there's that. It's a tough line to like follow, right? Because I think people value your work as an individual, like artist, when they know it's you. And there's this tightrope that if you cross too much on the other side, it becomes like catfishing, which you're pretending to be someone you aren't. And that's what magicians do, I guess. Magicians are cool because in a way they pretend they can do things that they can't. Remove the illusion, and they're just like a guy. So I don't know if there's like a weird metaphor here somewhere, but um, I use it for productivity, but I leave it out completely outside my creative work.
Right, and that's
Yeah.
exactly where I'm going with this. I mean that your final product is the result of an enormous amount of input from different sources, including AI. So what are you working on now? And you've got something that's screening at TriBeCa. Talk about that.
Oh yeah, it's been fun. The Instagram series, the TikTok series, like nominated for an award at TriBeCa, and it's going to be like running there. So that's been fun because I'm very used to just taking mediums that people don't really pay attention to and doing stories with them. So it's been good to get some recognition that is like maybe I am onto something. So and that's going to help hopefully turn it into like a bigger movie. So it's been really fun, especially working with mediums that have lots of people using them, like a big number of people using them.
Right, and well, but again, you're kind of poking through the curtain here. I mean, I think that you've been able to go from. I mean, you started with Hololens, which I think is incredible, frankly. But it doesn't really matter, if you're looking for the right audience, and of course that's a huge audience. But as you said, it can jump to something else because I think these things germinate, and who knows how long that's going to be around. You mentioned short form earlier, and of course, one of my favorite platforms was something called Vine, which Twitter, now called X, acquired, and that was 6-second videos, and some of the brilliant stuff that was created on that was just it was mind-boggling because you can, so I look forward to what comes next, and I'm sure you will be part of it. So this is the time when I ask people to ask questions, and not the bots here. Marianne Powers would like to hear your speculations on the future of gaming and XR. So it's a tad broad, but
No, of course. That's the thing. I think like gaming. Um, I think we're like in a readjustment period in XR in general, especially with virtual reality, augmented reality. Is going down the smart glasses route of like that plus AI, and that I think is a complete. It's a different class of hardware. I think the notion that like the HoloLens devices, all of the bloat that comes into just making 3D, like see through 3D optics. That's most of the expense and the engineering complications of a pair of AR glasses. Sorry, AR glasses. And I think we're losing a lot of that weight, and people are realizing sort of like the meta Ray-Ban approach is going to be the best way for that. So I don't see a lot of like augmented reality gaming happening on those devices, which are going to be more about it's just like a different class of devices. Mixed reality gaming, it's like there's some interesting experimental titles, and I've always believed a lot in like local co-op games and just like multiple devices in the same room. The kind of stuff you usually only have at LBEs. It's now beginning to be possible to create these like local experience games on the Quest platform and things like that. And I think those are interesting for mixed reality because it really benefits from the fact that you're there for other people. But for virtual reality in general, it's like we, in the pursuit of like mobility and creating like a more mainstream device, we also abandoned a lot of like the hardcore simulation crowd, which was a big part of for the virtual reality gaming space. The people behind the who really into like Half-Life Alyx and all of those games that were more about like fidelity and total immersion. So, and then the pursuit of a more larger mainstream audience, we kind of like abandoned those groups, and I think that was a very important core group that we should probably like not have abandoned this early. But because Meta is really like was just like driving the entire industry, that's where we ended up. So I think like gaming and XR is it's entering the stage of realignment to find out like, okay, what is the actual addressable market? How large are each one of these audiences? And I think Meta is giving away less money every year for titles and things, and focusing on the Horizon worlds. And so I expect it to go more and more indie, more and more smaller scale, and more niche. To be perfectly frank, yeah.
Yeah, and that's an excellent answer. But that speaks to a bit of a dilemma, I would think, and maybe somebody will sort of break that. But gaming, like anything else, is it's a hit-driven business. So we'll see what comes out. But yeah, I always think that's an area that's been a little bit left behind. And Apple has their Apple Arcade, but that's not necessarily XR focused. But there's so many other places, to look at that can be driven by particularly AR, one would think. But that may require a separate company. Who knows? Very interesting. So, well, I don't know if anyone else has other questions here, but Lucas, it's great seeing you as always. I prefer to see
Thanks,
you in
Chris.
real life, but it's good to see you here. And go see. When are you screening? For those who don't know, TriBeCa is June 4th through the 15th. So
I'll be there, but I think also Elizabeth is
uh,
raising the
Elizabeth
digital hand.
raised
Yeah,
her hand.
if you have time to answer a quick question, you had mentioned something
Yeah.
about 3D and sort of like, so losing, you did so much with it. What do you see now that it's becoming more accessible to everyone? Do you think it'll also just be a short-term novelty, or do you think it'll start to become the way people take pictures?
Well, what do you mean, like pictures in 3D? I don't understand the connection.
Yeah, so like now with my iPhone 16, I can start capturing
Oh,
everything as spatial.
Yeah, great question.
Pros and cons of that, and then kind of how does that even fit into long term for fine art photography, because it might sound kind of gimmicky to many fine artists.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll stay gimmicky, and but Apple's going to find ways to, over time, as they get their bearings with artificial intelligence, turn photos into like fully immersive simulations, like automatically, doing a lot of like AI guesswork, and maybe people will be interested in visiting those spaces. But I don't think, like it's going to be less. I think people having immersive capture hardware and more about people developing the technologies that turn simple 2D images into like larger environments with just really good AI guesswork.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I think that we're definitely going to have to look at. I mean, one of the things we didn't talk about here, just because we didn't, was Gaussian splats and nerfs and all that. But that's sort of I mean, splats are, we've seen some phenomenal work done that way. Who knows what will be on your phone next year? And what you do with that, and how we apply that to the kind of work that you're doing. It's really about the artist. The tools are fantastic, but how you combine this. I mean, you specifically as well as everyone else. Well, that's going to be close to a wrap. But I do want to say again, and yet we have a late person coming in here, so. They're just going to have to watch this on YouTube. Sorry about that. But we will be off 2 weeks from now because a whole boatload of us are going to be at AWE in Long Beach. And you can catch my panel, How to Create Lifelike Immersive Stories with Volumetric Video Production, 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 12th of June, room 101B. I'll be on stage with the aforementioned Lauren Michelle from Operaverse, Richard Broadbridge from 40 Views, who we've had here, and Corey Rosen, who's now with Super 78, great world-building producer. Michael, any thoughts? Any comments?
No, this has been great. Thanks, Lucas, for all your insights. I think, a lot of this new tech, like the 3D capture, like with just an iPhone, is just going to elevate what's a personal card. I mean, the idea of just taking a family snap that's immersive will just become the standard. And you look back through like your parents' photo books, they're black and white and, 4x3 images, because that was state of the art in the 50s and 60s. And now, just having something that, as you say, can probably with a touch of a button become like an immersive. It's not just here's my baby picture. It's look at, step into the baby environment, and people will be riffing off of that. I mean, it won't be necessarily a directly entertainment type of tool. It'll be referenced in entertainment, I guess, once it's established as a thing. But, to me, it's just how people will embrace personal media. I mean, I just 30 years ago, shooting, film was expensive. It was like $25 to buy and shoot and process a roll of film. Now with an iPhone, people are used to taking, 50 pictures when they walk into a room, and Chris Pfaff is a big user
I am, and I just upgraded my iCloud storage to 6 terabytes from 2. So there you have it. I don't fuck around, it's but spatial, look, and that's going to be for the least sexy part of the technology industry, storage. This is all going to be fantastic. But, again, we're going to need the right workflow and the right use cases. And Michael, yeah, you nailed it. I mean, I think that all those great panoramic photos that you used to see, many, many years ago, whether it was somebody's fraternity or a very large family picture, but going back to, the early days of 3D with some of the things we saw in the late 19th century, Lanterna Magica and all that. I mean, I think that we will have greater capability to create that kind of work. I think it ups the bar. It creates expectations. But once again, it means that the artist has more tools, and that creates expectations too. But I think one person who has vastly exceeded expectations, if there were any to begin with, is Lucas Rizzotto. And as the kids would say, he has the Riz. Yes, you do. And he really does. So if you haven't met this man in real life, please party with him. So thanks again. Hope to see you at TriBeCa. Hope to see you out there at AWE in Long Beach. And give it up for Lucas Rizzotto. Lucas does
Thanks,
build the
guys.
future. Thank you so much, man. And we'll be back on the 20. No, what do we? Let's do some dates here. The 26th. Right? Yes, the 26th of June. And we have no idea who it's going to be, Michael, right? Unless you can secure somebody you and I have been talking about.
I'm trying to secure someone. Yes.
Yep. And they will be phenomenal, as always. So, but you're phenomenal for being here, everyone. Thanks so much. And as always, be well, be safe, and be virtual. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye now.